This year we're going to talk about Frida Kahlo, and everything we do is going to be inspired by her life and art. So we're starting out with Los Colores de las Flores hat, Colors of the Flower, where we have mini skeins for different colors that are worked in a really easy pattern stitch. It's a slip stitch pattern, so you're only working with one color in a row. And the biggest challenge is the pom-pom, which is really not that hard. It's just a bunch of increases, and you do it really quickly so that it makes a ruffle. So let's look at some of the inspiration behind this project and this year's club. I guess this is something we could honestly say. Who isn't inspired by Frida Kahlo? She is the most famous artist from Mexico, and her work and her image and her clothes are all over the place. There are products designed to be inspired by her, dolls of Frida Kahlo. There are so many books about her life and her work, and her art is in museums and on the internet and everywhere you look. She was quite an amazing person in addition to being a wonderful artist. So we're going to take a look today quickly through her life, and some of the pictures here are artwork that I made inspired by her life, and others are her own artwork that were also largely autobiographical, and she did many, many, many selfies. And we'll be talking about all of these things more throughout the year, but today is an introduction. To me, Frida Kahlo's life is basically in three segments. So when she was young, she was with her family at home. She was a young girl, and she had polio. So her right leg growth was stunted, and so she had some trouble getting around. But what really, really created the pain and agony that she lived with her whole life was a bus accident that she had when she was young, where her leg was shattered, her uterus was pierced, she broke, and many, many bones, and she really never fully recovered from that. But that was what got her started painting. She joined a communist league, and she met Diego Rivera when she was young as well. And we'll see how those things influenced her throughout her life as we go. In her middle part of her life, she got married. She began wearing the traditional clothes that she's well known for. She had her work exhibited in California. She lived in the United States for a couple of years. She got divorced and remarried to Diego. She had a lifelong kind of love-hate relationship with him. Then, in the later part of her life, she began keeping a journal. She got re-involved with the Communist Party, and you got to remember that at this time, it was a very idealistic, futuristic, looking for a better world kind of idea. It wasn't what came after that with the Red Scare and the fear of communism. She was hospitalized when she was, not that old, as you can see, and she got gangrene in her foot. And initially, that was something that led to her being stuck in bed, but it also ultimately led to her death. She overdosed on opiates, and it was possibly suicide or possibly an accident. We will never know. So everything about Frida's life was rooted in her family, in her belief in the ideals of communism, and in her love-hate relationship with Diego Rivera. But perhaps more than all of that, she was rooted in her country of Mexico. She even changed her birth year to be 1910 on documentation because she wanted to be a true child of the Mexican Revolution. And of course, all the colors and folk art designs and her clothing, it's really easy to see how that was influenced by her love for the traditional cultures in Mexico. here we can see a little bit more about Frida's accident when she was young. She was only 18 when the trolley bus accident occurred, and here's just a longer list of injuries that she suffered. And she had trouble with her feet and legs for her whole life from polio and from this accident. And one thing she wrote in her journal and drew something like this. This is my interpretation of it in watercolor. Feet, what do I need you for if I have wings to fly? And her art was what gave her those wings. So as I said, um, Frida was in love with Diego Rivera. She married him, divorced him, married him. She was only 20 when she married him, and he was 41, so he was twice as old as her. And, as was the day with what was, I guess, expected or allowed for artists and other powerful, rich people. Not that they were rich, but, they had a good life. Diego was a womanizer. He had all kinds of girlfriends and affairs, and Frida still loved him, so she stayed with him. Later, she had her own affairs, and they had, I guess, what would be called an open relationship today. But one thing she said to a friend one time was, I have suffered two great accidents in my life. One was the trolley, and the other was Diego. Diego was by far the worst. So the last few years, there was an exhibit of Frida's clothing that went around the world, and some books were published with photos of it because a lot of her belongings were locked in the bathroom until 50 years after her death, according to a mandate by Diego. So those things were just made public recently. And so we saw so much inspiring stuff from her wardrobe and her personal belongings. She had adopted traditional clothing of one of Mexico's indigenous cultures, and she added pieces from Europe and China into her wardrobe. And the first time she dressed this way, what became her signature style, was on her wedding day. And the shawl that she wore was instead of a wedding ring. She never wore a wedding ring through her life, but you'll see in most of the pictures of her, she's always wearing a shawl with the traditional weeple blouse and a full skirt and all of the other accoutrements we're used to seeing with her. So as I said, Frida did a lot of selfies, all of her inspiration from Mexico, Diego, her family. All of this is in all of her artwork. Of course, being autobiographical, her work often deals with pain and identity and what it was like for her to be a human being in Mexico during that time. So she has also become an icon of feminism because she was such a strong and unique and courageous woman. And she's also, of course, known for her Mexican national identity. So I hope you're as excited as I am to go through the year and think about what would Frida knit and work on projects that are with yarns I dye inspired by her art and clothing and Mexican folk art, and projects that are also inspired by her art and clothing. And, it will just take a deeper look into different parts of her life and her artwork as we go throughout the year, and each project will be inspired by something specific that she wore or owned or painted. So keep up with this with your knitting, and if you can't by any, yeah, that's it.